the most despicable man to have ever set foot in the Americas. That is how one historian described the Spanish conquistador Nuño de Guzman. He was notorious for his cruelty to both the Spaniard and native alike. Most notable was Conquest of Western Mexico and creating a semi-autonomous province called Nueva Galicia, which include the modern Mexican states of Michoacan, Jalisco, Guanajuato, Colima, Nayarit, and Zacatecas. Now let's give some context. The year is 1529. The Aztec Empire had been conquered 8 years earlier by Hernan Cortez. The Spanish king Carlos I or Charles V feared that he would establish his own independent kingdom, so he sent Nuno de Guzman, born in Guadalajara, Spain, who was very close to the crown, to go put New Spain in order. When he arrived, he was put as the governor of Panuco on the northeastern coast of Mexico. He was also made the first president of the Audiencia of Mexico, which made him very powerful. Because of this position, he organized an expedition to northwestern Mexico. It is speculated that he wanted to extend his domain from sea to sea. He rounded up several hundred Spaniards and about 8,000 native warriors from central Mexico and departed to the west. By 1530, he had gone through Toluca and was on his way to the Tarascan kingdom. These people called themselves the Purepecha, located in what is now modern Michoacan state, and ruled by the Cazonci, or king, Tanguachin II. They had been at war with the Aztecs since the late 1400s. The fall of the Aztec Empire prompted them to send a delegation to Cortez in Coyoacan in 1521. After extracting tribute from the Cazonci, Guzman accused them of many things, such as hiding gold and silver from him. He was then sentenced to death, and that marked the end of the independent Tarascan kingdom. After getting supplies and reinforcements from the Tarascans, Guzman took his men to Purandiro, which was the westernmost border of the Tarascans. There he ordered a church raised. Next he went to Cuiseno, where the people fled before the requerimiento could be read. The requerimiento was a set of orders that was written by the Spaniards to be proclaimed before the natives with the help of a translator. It stated that God had given the Spaniards the right to own the lands, and that they should accept the word of God and the King of Spain as their new lord. If they did not accept this, the Spaniards said they had the right to conquer them and their lands by force. Because of poor translation and cultural misunderstanding between both sides, the requerimiento would be rejected and war would ensue. Now back to the story. They went to the edge of the Rio Grande de Santiago, which had previously marked the northernmost limit of Spanish exploration in northwestern Mexico. Some natives showed hostility, but quickly sued for peace when the artillery was fired. Guzman went to a town called Guiseo at the edge of the river. Here he began to show his true colors. The chief of this town did not provide any supplies for the Spanish. That is when Guzman ordered his war dogs released on the poor chief, whom they left all bitten and burned his village down. He then went to Tonalá, whose chieftain and other nobles went to go hide on a hill fortress where they planned on how to attack the expedition. Meanwhile, Guzman was angered that the chief did not appear, so he burned the kingdom. He then went to the aforementioned hill, where he fought and triumphed over the chief and her forces. They surrendered, and Guzman went on to Nochistlán in modern Zacatecas. There he split his force. We will focus on his group. Guzman and his army marched north to a town named Aguacatlan that was well populated within the valley. Here he demanded gold and 1,000 tamemes, who were porters to carry their belongings. Then he reached Jalisco. He was well received by its chief. This was until what is believed to have been because of a misinterpretation. He ordered them to give him tribute. They rose up from where they were sitting in defiance. Guzman said he would destroy their kingdom, which he quickly carried out. He burned the village and captured many of its inhabitants. He then went to Tepic. Then the expedition forded a river, where they fought with some natives who managed to injure a few horses and Spaniards. After this, he went to look for a town called Aztlan, not to be confused with the mythical homeland of the Aztecs, Aztlan. It took them a week to reach because of the numerous marshes in the area. They arrived in September, which was the rainy season. The town flooded and there was a great torrent of rain. Many of the native allies fell ill, their captains pleading Guzman to return back to Jalisco. He refused. Some Spaniards also tried to escape back, but Guzman found out and had them executed. He decided to head more up north to avoid these wretched conditions, but many decided to die by their own hands rather than continue suffering in those conditions. Seeing all the supplies and men he had lost, Guzman sent some men back to Michoacan to get provisions and reinforcements. He also sent a group up north to the village of Chiametla, where they were well received with food and provisions, and porters to help them take it back. The porters ended up fleeing and telling their fellow villagers of how the Spaniards overworked them. Meanwhile, Guzman waited out the winter in Aztlan. It turned out the men he had sent to Michoacan for supplies had gone out to Jalisco and committed all types of atrocities there. Nonetheless, Guzman pushed on north into the village of Quezala. Then they went to another town called Pizatla, They destroyed it because it did not submit. A group of native allies had managed to escape, but were attacked by the inhabitants of the province, with only one returning alive. The expedition made it to the town of Cihuatlan, which was said to have been filled with women and very little men, reminding the Spaniards of the Amazons of Greek mythology. Finally, in 1531, they pushed farther north, and Guzman founded a town called San Miguel de Culiacan, now the modern capital of the modern state of Sinaloa. And this is where the expedition ends. Guzman went back and set up his headquarters in Tepic. The trail of death and destruction was not forgotten. Many Spaniards wrote accounts of what happened during the expedition to bring Guzman to justice. A few years later, he was tried and stripped of all he gained and had in the New World, sent back to Spain, dying a poor man in 1558. But his actions had far-reaching consequences that would come back to haunt the Spaniards in the future.